Today, I'm at the Xilinhot in Beisiin. So the Xilinhot in Beisiin, or the Xilinhot bèizǐ miào, the Beis Temple, Beis Temple, was built in the 1700s, around the Qianlong era, right? And Beis is like kind of like Bela in Manchurian. It's like the title for a prince or a king of some kind, right? Some kind of leader, and that kind of gives you an idea like how important this place is. This is the prince or the king's temple complex. The Beis Temple is built on the south side of a hill overlooking today's Xilinhot, Xilin city, right? And on the top of this hill is the ᠪᠡᠶᠢᠰᠡ, and the obo is a pile of rocks, sometimes kind of haphazardly constructed, sometimes very formal. It is essentially a shrine to the spirits of the land, and it's very deeply rooted in Mongolian shamanism. Now, I was raised Buddhist, and while I don't subscribe to any particular sect of Buddhism, it's colored my life quite a bit. And the deeper I dive into Mongolian culture, the more apparent it becomes how deeply linked it is with Tibetan Buddhism. And Tibetan Buddhism itself has a very colorful history. And as you delve into the lore of the land and the culture of the people here, you realize that the Tibetan plateau and the Mongolian grasslands are deeply linked through the centuries, but not only through exchange, but also through war. Yes, warfare. Now, today, especially in the West, Buddhism is known for peace, meditation, stoic introspection, and relinquishing the material, right? Well, here we are, spiritual beings in corporeal bodies, and even if it's all an illusion, it's our collective illusion. And the fact of the matter is, within this reality there is life and death, and if you're dead, you can't be pursuing nirvana. The reality for Tibetan Buddhism historically, in many ways, has also included war, politics, and a struggle for supreme power. And I know that might be really surprising for some of y'all, especially you guys who aren't familiar with Buddhism's story, right? Not in Siddhartha Gautama's time, but ever since. So while I take this walk today, exploring, wandering this Xilinhot in Beisiin, let me talk to you about the lore of the land, the rise of the Gelug school, the yellow hats of Tibetan Buddhism, and how it involved the Mongols and the Manchu in a major way. Let's go. So, real quick, Tibet was actually once a powerful empire. You might not know this because, we think Tibetan, we think Dalai Lama, but actually, people don't talk about it much, but during the reign of the Dharma king of the Yarling dynasty, right, and this is way back when, the united Tibetans were actually able to defeat the Tang dynasty in war. Yes, that Tang Dynasty, the golden age of Chinese civilization and empire, the same Tang Dynasty that was able to co-opt the Turkic tribes and expand west all the way until they're checked by the Abbasids. Yeah, that Tang Dynasty. So this was a big deal, right? The Tibetan Plateau had not been fully united to that degree until then, and it was a powerful thing. Under Songtsen Gampo's rule in the 500s AD, we see Buddhism become firmly established in the Tibetan Plateau as part of his administration. Right now, Buddhism brought not only religion, spirituality, but also brought administration, scholarship, statecraft, diplomacy, links to South Asia. Right, so it was quite an important thing. Dynasties would come and go, and Buddhism itself in Tibet would wax and wane, but gradually it became the dominant force in the land. Centuries later, the Mongols, led by Genghis Khan, would conquer much of Asia, in fact, a huge portion of the world, including Tibet. And as they established their regime, a lot of them converted to Tibetan Buddhism, and it became almost like the de facto state religion. In the 1200s, Kublai Khan even worked with a particular monk and imperial preceptor known as Drogon Chogyal Phagpa. Hopefully I pronounced that right. And they created an alphabet that could encompass Mongolian, Chinese of the time, Uyghur, and Tibetan. And after the Han Chinese revolted, pushed the Mongols back north and established the Daming Diguo, the Ming Empire, the Ming Dynasty would actually continue to patronize Tibetan Buddhism. Meanwhile, the Mongol world was becoming increasingly divided and fragmented, and in Tibet, things were changing. So, things were about to get real Game of Thrones in the Tibetan world, and it would have a massive ripple effect all across East Asia. Let's sit down for a moment and talk about that. So, almost 1,000 years since Songtsen Gampo, that great unifier of Tibet, that Dharma king, right? In 1565, there arose the Tsangpa dynasty, and they were centered in Shigatse. And this powerful dynasty favored the Karma Kagyu sect of Tibetan Buddhism. Now, in Tibetan Buddhism, there's the Nyingma, the Sakya, and the Kagyu sects, and they're known as the Red Hats because of the hats that their monks wear on formal occasions and events. However, the Red Hats and their Tsangpa patrons, they didn't go unchallenged. See, another fourth school of Tibetan Buddhism was rising. This is the Gelug school, the Yellow Hats, as they're known. And they grew increasingly popular, and they found their champion in a very particular Mongol leader known as Altan Khan, the Golden Khan. Now, Altan Khan was busy trying to unify as many Mongols as he could, and he formed a strong political handshake with Sonam Gyatso, the man that would later become the third Dalai Lama, right? The first two leaders of the school being retroactively made Dalai Lamas as well. And so not only did they finally meet up, these two leaders, but when they did, the third Dalai Lama, Sonam Gyatso, actually proclaimed that he was, in fact, the reincarnation of Drogon Chogyal Phagpa. Remember that monk that had made that alphabet for Kublai Khan? Yeah. And he also proclaimed that Altan Khan was, in fact, the reincarnation of Kublai Khan himself. And, in this era, that medieval Chinggisid blood was very important for getting that legitimacy for the unification of Mongols. And so this was a big deal. They proclaimed that they were reincarnated to cooperate and to spread Buddhism amongst the Mongols. And this political alliance also strengthened Altan Khan's ambitions and claims to the unification of all the Mongols. And in fact, after Sonam Gyatso died, the fourth Dalai Lama would actually be the great-grandson of Altan Khan, Yonten Gyatso. So, some power plays are being made, and Buddhism was right in the thick of it. So, in case it wasn't obvious, Buddhism wasn't just a pathway to nirvana. No, Buddhism actually came with a whole civilizational package of statecraft, medicine, scholarship, astronomy, and so on. So there was real power in Tibetan Buddhism. And where there's power, there's going to be a war for dominance. So the Reds and the Yellows were at odds. And the Yellows were centered in Lhasa, today's, I guess, capital of Tibet, autonomous region. And there in Lhasa, they had an army of Mongols defending them. And not only that, they had spread the yellow sect of Buddhism throughout Mongol lands and had many converts, both north and northwest of Tibet. And remember, the Mongols had once conquered the Tibetans. And so you can imagine that for many local Tibetans, and especially the Red Hats and their Tsangpa dynastic patrons, this was a very tense situation. You had a bunch of foreign warriors in your lands defending a rival school. That's crazy. And they weren't having it. You can imagine the geopolitical situation was extremely tense. And eventually, it came to war. A Tibetan army loyal to the Red sect routed Lhasa's Mongol guards and ravaged the city, massacring thousands of monks. Yonten Gyatso, the fourth Dalai Lama, fled and died later on. The Red School persecuted the Yellow School and had an allied army of Red School-affiliated Mongols and Tibetans. Not only that, the Kham to the east were hostile to the Yellow School, and the Bhutanese to the south were hostile to Lhasa as well. So the Yellow School, in their darkest hour, sent for aid, and the Mongols would answer. A certain Güshi Khan, Khoshit leader of the Oirat, the Western Mongols, and a devotee of the Gelug school, would come to Lhasa's aid. In 1637, with a small army of 10,000, he fought and defeated a Red sect-affiliated Half Mongol army 3 times larger than his. After that, he went east and turned on the Kham and defeated them. War raged across the Tibetan plateaus, mountains and valleys, and partnered with the fifth Dalai Lama. The Khoshit Khanate of Güshi Khan would destroy the Tsangpa dynasty of Shigatse and the Red sect warriors. And they would unify Tibet under the Gelug school, Galdan Phodrang government in 1642. The fifth Dalai Lama was declared the supreme authority in Tibet, and the Dalai Lama in turn proclaimed that Güshi Khan was the Dharma king. Now, the exact nature of the Khoshit Mongol and Tibetan governance is unclear. Whether it was a patron and priest relationship where the Mongols served as a military, or if the Khan actually effectively ruled Tibet and Dalai Lama was just a figurehead, we're not sure. But nevertheless, the Yellow School, once nearly annihilated, was now thriving. And so many Khoshit Mongols would occupy today's Qinghai that they, because of the altitude, would become known as Upper Mongols. So you got Inner Mongolia, Outer Mongolia, Upper Mongolia. And I guess if you count the Dzungars, Western Mongolia. There's a lot of Mongolias back in the day. The war had caused so much hardship and famine, and while fighting continued in Bhutan, the end result was that the Yellow School was victorious. And that's a fact that would change East Asian history forever. For many Mongols, and in fact many Chinese and Manchu, Tibet had become a prestigious center of spirituality, education, and legitimacy. Lhasa was the epicenter, and the Gelug school reigned supreme. Temples and monasteries were popping up all over Mongol lands, and for a nomadic herding society, that's a big deal. This Tibetan Buddhist hegemony was no joke. Güshi Khan's grandson, Galdan, and Zanabazar, great-grandson of Altan Khan's nephew, among so many other Mongol elites, would actually go to Tibet for their education, and they would delve deeply into statecraft, Buddhism, medicine, astronomy, and so on. Man, I'm getting cold. Let's get moving. So the fifth Dalai Lama had taken the Gelug school, the yellow sect, from its darkest hour, from near annihilation to warfare and famine, and through all that process, finally, to triumph. The Mongol world was sending its best and brightest and its elites to Lhasa for education, and the entire Tibetan plateau was united under the Gelug school. But meanwhile, to the east, the Manchus were conquering China, and the Shunzi emperor was also hungry for his own legitimacy. And so he reached out to the fifth Dalai Lama, and they finally established a relation. The fifth Dalai Lama recognized the legitimacy of the Shunzi emperor's rule over China and the establishment of the Qing dynasty, and he recognized the fifth Dalai Lama's supremacy over Tibet. This also gave the Dalai Lama another benefactor in the Manchus to counterbalance the power of the Hoshit Mongols who were in Tibet. So the Mongols, the Manchu and Chinese, and the Tibetans, this yellow sect dominated balance of power was a delicate thing, and it would not last. Now, after the death of the Shunzi emperor, the Qing Empire was sent into turmoil, and a young Kangxi would have to fight to protect his life, secure his power, and to stabilize his empire. And he would go on to become one of the finest rulers in human history. Meanwhile, Zanabazar would return north of the Gobi Desert and become the supreme ruler of what is today known as Mongolia, the country, or quote-unquote Outer Mongolia. And as for Galdan, the descendant of Güshi Khan, the guy who helped the Gelug school reign supreme in Tibet through his Khosrow Khanate, well, life was about to get interesting for him. Trouble was brewing in the western Mongol lands. Though Galdan was a Lama in Tibet and studying at the time, he backed his brother's claim to being Khan of the Dzungar Mongols, the Oirat Mongols. Now their half-brothers schemed against them and actually killed his brother. So when his mother went to Tibet with word of this murder, this assassination, he renounced being a Lama and he went straight back to the Dzungar lands, to the western Mongol lands, and he avenged his brother. And after a massive power struggle, Galdan became the hegemon of the Oirat Mongols and was proclaimed the Boshuktu Khan, the divine Khan, by the Dalai Lama, the highest title that could be conferred upon a ruler. The Dzungar Mongols expanded greatly, becoming one of the largest Inner Asian empires, and Galdan, the Boshuktu Khan, perhaps one of the most deeply educated Mongol rulers ever, would challenge the brilliant Kangxi of the Manchu Aisunjoro clan of the Qing dynasty, and caught between the two in this massive war was Tibet. But you know what? That's a story for another time. I hope you guys enjoyed this local lore. The history and culture of the Mongols and Tibetans is so deeply intertwined now, and I think it's something to reflect upon. You know, I engage in archery, I engage in the wrestling, but we must also respect and understand how the past has brought us to where we're at. Anyways, guys, you know, in my journey wandering this land and immersing in the archery and the wrestling especially, I had to make sure that I spent time really getting to know its culture and its history. You know, all the factors that bring us to where we're at today, right? To really understand a people's past and their psyche. In any case, hopefully I didn't butcher too many names. I'm still learning Mongolian and Tibetan. I don't really speak. But you know what? I'm here to communicate this stuff to you guys in English, and hopefully I've done that well. If you guys enjoyed it, please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, thank you for joining me on my journey. I salute yours. Peace.